At 85 years old, Smokey Robinson sits in near silence and finally begins to talk. He remembers the day it all stopped being just about music. He and his group had gone to audition for Jackie Wilson's managers. Jackie Wilson, the dynamite voice from Detroit, was his childhood hero, the man whose records he wore out until the grooves turned gray. As a kid, Smokey didn't just admire Jackie. He studied him. Every note, every breath, every impossible high run. But somewhere between those teenage dreams and the reality of backstage corridors, he realized something no one wanted to say out loud. In America, music has a body count. By the time he reached the height of his career, Smokey had lived long enough to see what others only heard whispered in rumors. According to him, the industry had been lying for decades. He wasn't just a songwriter, not just a Motown legend. He was a witness, a man standing quietly in the shadows of Studio A, a figure leaning in a doorway of a segregated dressing room, a pair of tired eyes watching executives laugh at jokes they didn't mean, smile with mouths that were busy rewriting contracts in the next room. He watched black R&B icons walk onto stages like gods, draped in spotlights and applause, then walk off into a maze of locked doors and quiet threats. He saw contracts rewritten overnight, royalties vanish into accounting errors, skin tone lightened on magazine covers until even the artists barely recognized themselves. He heard that FBI files on some of his peers were thicker than their lyric notebooks. He watched entire careers crushed for being too black, too political, too free. Prodigies turned into machines. Women pushed out of their own sound. Men punished for telling the truth. Whole genres burned down just to stop black ownership before it could take root. Tonight, Smokey finally opens the file he's been carrying in his memory, revealing 15 legends the industry, according to him, tried to bury. 1. Ray Charles, the blind genius they tried to bury. They called him a prodigy. They called him a pioneer. They praised his blend of gospel, jazz, and blues. But what most histories gloss over is how hard America reportedly tried to bury Ray Charles long before the world agreed to call him a genius. The story narrows down to a single night, the 14th of April, 1961, Augusta, Georgia. Ray arrives to perform, the sound of the crowd pulsing through the walls. But inside the venue, there's a problem. The audience is segregated. The promoter warns him, then threatens him, then begs him. Police wait by the door, prepared to escort him through the colored entrance, as if his blindness made him easier to handle, easier to move. Ray, unable to see their faces but feeling every ounce of pressure in the room, stands still and says one word: no. That decision, witnesses later said, cost him more than a show. Minutes later, Georgia officials banned him from performing in the state. For years afterward, his name was reportedly blacklisted in certain circles, shows canceled at the last moment, and some newspapers painted him as a troublemaker instead of a man asking for basic human dignity. It was never just that one night. Throughout the 1,950 seconds and 1,960 seconds, Ray traveled from city to city as a top-billed headliner. Yet dozens of hotels refused him rooms. He would arrive after 6-hour drives, body aching, eyes burning, ready to collapse into bed, only to hear the same cold sentence: "We don't house your kind." So he and his band slept in cars parked under flickering streetlights. Night after night, city after city. Ray once joked bitterly, "I can't see the light, but somehow they still can't stand to see me." It sounded like a punchline, but behind that laugh was a wound that never closed. Smokey toured many of the same routes, played the same southern venues, watched the same hotel doors slam shut. He remembered the whispers in backstage corners. They're trying to break Ray before he becomes too big to control. Even after Ray became a national treasure, Grammy winner, chart dominator, president pleaser, certain small towns reportedly still posted quiet notices. Whites only tonight. He could play for presidents and still not sit in the same restaurant as some of the men hired to open for him. Racism didn't dim his talent, it sharpened it. It forced his pain into a flame so bright that eventually even the nation that tried not to see him had to bow its head. But beneath every accolade lies the truth. Ray Charles didn't just overcome blindness, He pushed through a country that was determined not to see him as fully human. 2. Sam Cooke, the voice they silenced. The 8th of October 1963, Shreveport, Louisiana. Sam Cooke walks into a hotel lobby with 3 bandmates, dressed in a crisp white suit that still carries the heat of the stage lights. His cologne lingers in the air, his ears are still ringing from applause. He is one of the most famous voices in America. The receptionist doesn't even look up. "We don't allow Negroes here." Sam insists he has a reservation. The staff threatens to call the police. Within minutes, Sam Cooke, whose records spin on radios across the country, is standing outside beneath a buzzing neon sign, humiliated, fists tight, heart pounding. Witnesses said his voice shook with rage. That night shifted something in him. It didn't just hurt, it rewired him. That night is believed to have helped birth the Sam Cooke who would write "A Change Is Gonna Come," a song that sounded like prophecy and felt like a confession. But his awakening came with a price. By 1964, Sam was planning something the industry quietly feared. His own record label, his own publishing company, black-owned, black-run, designed to give black artists real ownership for the first time. Smokey Robinson would later recall that big labels didn't want Sam to rise that way. They were scared. Sam wasn't just another star. He was on his way to becoming a black mogul. Then came the 11th of December 1964. Sam Cooke was shot dead in a Los Angeles motel. The official story claimed he was intoxicated, violent, confused. Authorities accepted the account quickly. Too quickly, according to many who knew him. Fans, friends, and activists said from the start that the story didn't add up. Sam was shot once in the chest. No fingerprints were taken. No meaningful investigation was pursued. The case was closed in roughly 48 hours. For a man who was reportedly preparing to financially liberate black artists, that speed felt suspicious, and for many, it still does. Close friends said Sam had begun to feel watched. He told people he believed someone was trying to sabotage his deals. He suspected that certain studios were terrified of a black power structure controlling its own masters in a white-dominated industry. His death ended more than a life. It ended a revolution still in draft form. The industry called it a tragedy. Those who loved him still talk about it as a silencing. 3. Aretha Franklin, the queen they treated like a maid. Aretha Franklin was the undisputed queen of soul. But the country that sang along to her records often treated her like anything but royalty. In the late 1,960 seconds, and throughout the 1,970 seconds, she was selling out arenas, her voice lifting entire crowds to their feet. Yet white promoters reportedly withheld her full pay again and again, blaming paperwork errors and miscalculations. Her father, Reverend C.L. Franklin, was known as a charismatic, powerful man in his own right. One night in Detroit, when Aretha's payment mysteriously came up short, he drove to a promoter's home at 2 a.m. It was said that he brought a gun on the seat beside him, not to fire it, but as a message. He demanded the missing money for his daughter. It was handed over immediately. Even at the peak of her fame, indignities stacked up like unpaid bills. In a Los Angeles studio in 1973, a white engineer reportedly told her to use the back entrance because artists of your type don't go through the front. Aretha didn't scream. She didn't argue. She simply walked away and canceled the session. No apology ever came. During a 1971 recording date, a studio director shouted across the room, "Tell that black girl with the big voice to hold back a little." Aretha stood there with the microphone in her hand, smiled politely, then excused herself. She walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and cried in absolute silence for 10 minutes. No one heard the sound. No one saw her shoulders shake. Then she wiped her face, stepped back into the studio, and delivered one of the greatest vocal performances of her career. Smokey Robinson would later recall a night in 1968 that he could never shake. During a rehearsal, a white promoter pulled him aside and casually asked if Aretha could carry her own bags, so the guests wouldn't feel uncomfortable seeing staff handle them. Smokey said the room went dead quiet, not because of anything Aretha said, but because of the way she looked at the man. Her eyes were cold, steady. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't curse. She just turned, walked out, and left the insult hanging in the air. According to Smokey, that moment clung to her like smoke for years. Behind every flawless note was a woman scarred by a world that wanted her sound but resented her presence. Aretha's life was a battlefield long before she walked out in gowns and heels. She didn't sing about respect because it was catchy. She sang it because it had been withheld from her at every turn, every negotiation, every door she was told to use. Her crown was heavy, not from diamonds and glory, but from the weight of what she had to survive just to keep wearing it. The Queen reigned, yes, but she reigned through a level of pain and humiliation most people never saw and few truly understood. If you know someone whose life or personality mirrors this story, share their name in the comments. We'd like to explore their journey as well. The tragedy of Marvin Gaye didn't begin with the gunshot that ended his life. It started long before that, in the bright, polished rooms of Motown, where brilliance was welcomed only if it fit into a box built for white comfort. In 1967, Marvin walked into Studio A in Detroit, carrying a notebook full of lyrics about war, poverty, police brutality, and black suffering. He wasn't bringing in another love song. He was bringing in a report from the streets. Berry Gordy flipped through the pages, listened to fragments, and frowned. According to people who were there, he told Marvin, "This is too political. Sing lighter. The white audience won't understand this." What he really meant was simple. Hide your pain. Hide your truth. Hide your blackness. Marvin watched hit after hit get shaped and softened, lyrics adjusted, edges sanded down so they wouldn't disturb anyone listening from a safe suburban living room. Outside, the world was burning. Inside the studio, he was asked to smile and keep it romantic. By 1970, after the death of Tammy Terrell shattered him, the mask started to crack. Marvin couldn't pretend anymore. One night, he walked into Hitsville around 3 a.m., exhausted, carrying the final draft of What's Going On. Engineers said he looked like someone being chased by something no one else could see. He played the record. The room stayed cold. Motown executives listened, stone-faced, and told him it was wrong for radio. Too dark, too raw, too real. The album was reportedly close to being shelved permanently. Smokey Robinson later described one night outside a late studio session when Marvin caught him alone. Marvin's eyes were red, his shoulders slumped like he hadn't slept in days. He leaned in so close, Smokey could feel his breath and whispered, "They want my voice, not my truth." His hands shook as he repeated it, slower this time, like a confession. "They don't want to hear what it's like to be us." In that moment, Smokey understood Marvin wasn't just making a record. He was fighting a war with his label, with America, with the silence expected of black men made famous by white-controlled systems. When What's Going On finally clawed its way to release in May 1971, it changed American music forever. But the victory came with a cost hidden behind the charts and critical praise. The man who made it was drained, hunted by expectations, worn down by an industry terrified of a black prophet who refused to shut up and sing love songs only. Marvin's despair has often been blamed on personal demons, but behind those demons was a world that would not allow him to be fully human, an artist, a man, and a truth-teller at the same time. Every note he ever sang still carries the weight of someone the industry tried again and again to silence. 5. James Brown, the Godfather the FBI watched. The night James Brown shouted, "Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud." In 1968, he crossed a line that the country was never going to forgive. The crowd roared. Children memorized the chant. Streets trembled with a new kind of pride. And somewhere in Washington, D.C., FBI agents reportedly opened a file with his name stamped in red. From that moment forward, James Brown stopped being just entertainment. He became a problem. A black man telling other black people to stand up straight and stop apologizing. Between 1969 and 1974, his tour schedule looked less like a calendar and more like a war map. Southern venues canceled shows at the last minute with flimsy excuses. Promoters whispered that he was too political. In Jackson, Mississippi, after electrifying a crowd, James stepped off stage, still covered in sweat, only to be told, "You need to leave through the back before trouble starts." Trouble meant uniformed white officers waiting outside, not for protection, but for intimidation. The worst moment came in 1971 during a show in Tennessee. James was mid-song, the band blazing behind him, the crowd screaming, when a white police officer suddenly stormed the stage. He didn't issue a warning. He didn't even speak. He just grabbed James by the arm and yanked him out of the spotlight. The audience gasped and froze. The band stopped playing. Time seemed to hang in the air. James didn't swing. He didn't shove back. Not because he wasn't angry, but because he understood the cost of fighting in front of that many witnesses. Later, he reportedly told Smokey Robinson, "They wanted to show me who really runs this country." Behind the scenes, agents monitored his phone calls. Tax investigators hovered around his finances. Local police tailed his tour buses. Every time he raised his fist or raised his voice, someone tightened the rope around his life a little more. To America, he was the godfather of soul. To certain parts of the government, he was a dangerous man teaching other black men to stand too tall. James Brown survived the record labels. He survived fame. But what scarred him most, people close to him said, was the chilling knowledge that his own government had wanted him controlled, watched, contained. 6. Whitney Houston, the superstar they tried to whitewash. Before the world called her The Voice, Whitney Houston lived inside a split reality. Adored on stage, reshaped off it. One life belonged to the fans. The other belonged to a machine that believed she'd be more profitable if she looked less like herself. In 1985, when her debut album shot to #1, white radio executives praised her as safe, polished, less urban. The praise came with a message buried in every compliment. "We love you because you don't look too black." Whitney felt that pressure immediately. On photo shoots, editors reportedly retouched her skin to make it lighter. Publicists instructed her to soften her smile, soften her hair, soften everything. One photographer later admitted that editors asked him to remove black features from her covers. Her team denied the accusation. But Whitney didn't. She felt it. She saw it. She hated it. Then came 1989, the blow that left a scar. At the Soul Train Awards, in a room filled with her own community, some in the crowd booed her. They called her Tupac, not black enough, a woman who'd been pushed into an image designed for crossover success, not cultural honesty. They weren't just booing Whitney, they were booing what the industry had done to her. Backstage, according to witnesses, Whitney tried to keep her tears hidden. She told Smokey Robinson quietly, "I don't know who they want me to be." She said, "they," like she was pointing at a ghost, the invisible network of executives, marketers, and gatekeepers who never showed their faces on stage but controlled every light that hit hers. The whitewashing only escalated. Fashion shoots insisted on straighter hair. Marketing teams tweaked her album art and visuals. A major magazine once darkened a black male co-star's skin in a photo so that Whitney would stand out more. Every change was called styling. Every choice was really a subtraction. Everything around her worked like a slow eraser. Whitney Houston wasn't broken by fame alone. She was broken by the repeated message that she had to split herself in two to be loved at the highest level, that there was a version of Whitney America would embrace and a version it would quietly reject. She carried a voice too powerful for an industry that wanted a black singer without blackness, a superstar without the full weight of a black woman's identity. Her tragedy wasn't just the ending the world obsesses over. Her tragedy was the long, quiet erosion of self, living in a world that worshipped her sound and routinely rejected the woman behind it. If you know someone whose life or personality mirrors this story, share their name in the comments. We'd like to explore their journey as well. There had never been a voice like Luther Vandross. Velvet smooth, effortless, overflowing with soul. Audiences melted when he sang. The industry praised his tone, his phrasing, his control. But behind every compliment was a cold calculation. Love the sound, bury the man. As Luther stepped into the 1,980 seconds ready to claim his place among the greats, executives repeated the same poison behind closed doors. White audiences won't accept a black queer artist. It didn't matter that Luther never publicly confirmed anything about his personal life. The assumption alone was enough to wrap chains around his freedom. In 1985, during promo for The Night I Fell in Love, a label executive allegedly told him to lose weight so you don't look too black. Luther laughed in the moment, turning it into a joke, because that's what survival often looks like. But Smokey Robinson later said Luther cried alone in a hallway afterward, the kind of broken, silent crying a man does when his very body is treated like a problem to be fixed. Another day, around mid-1987, during a session at Warner's studio in Burbank, an A&R rep muttered behind the glass, "He's too black for crossover." Luther heard it through his headphones. He lowered his head mid-phrase, stopped singing, and walked out of the booth. He didn't come back for 2 days. No fight, no explosion, just absence. He was told what clothes to wear, what stories to avoid, what pronouns to dodge. Interviews were scripted. Outfits were selected for him. Publicists drilled the same line into his ear. Keep it neutral, don't hint at anything. Luther once told Quincy in a quiet moment, "They love my voice, but they hate the man attached to it." That sentence wasn't just a complaint, it was a verdict. Luther's songs made millions fall hopelessly in love, slow dancing in kitchens and wedding halls. But the man who sang those words was never allowed to love himself openly in front of the world he helped soundtrack. And that is the cruelty the industry still refuses to name. 8. Rick James, the rebel the industry punished. Rick James crashed into the music scene like broken glass and flashing sirens, loud, brilliant, unruly, unapologetically black. He didn't just walk into rooms. He kicked the door open. And a music business built on quiet, obedient black stars decided to make him pay for it. In 1981, when Super Freak exploded, Rick's team submitted the video to MTV. The answer reportedly came back on a cold, typed slip. Too black, too rough, not suitable for broadcast. That same year, the channel aired a rotating lineup of white rock acts with far more sexual imagery. But Rick, with braids, leather, and full-throttle blackness, was denied. In 1983, after Rick publicly called out racism in radio programming, dozens of stations quietly pushed him off their A-lists. His manager showed him an internal memo from a major radio chain. Rick James is no longer a priority artist. No reason, no appeal, just erasure. Those close to him say Rick laughed when he read it, but his eyes were pure fury. "They want me famous," he later told Quincy, "but they don't want me free." The backlash only sharpened. In parts of the South, concert venues started canceling his shows within hours of curtain time. Promoters whispered he was too militant, too threatening, too urban. A backstage witness from a 1984 New Orleans date recalled a white promoter saying, "We don't need black leaders hiding in rock stars." Rick overheard it. He turned away, walked into his dressing room, and smashed a mirror. Not because he loved destruction, but because the image staring back at him was a man the system refused to let exist on his own terms. Rick James didn't just face racism, he fought it head-on, and the industry, according to many who watched it happen, made sure he paid for every punch he threw. His crime wasn't being wild. It was refusing to bow. 9. Tina Turner, the survivor they didn't want to win. Before the world crowned her a legend, Tina Turner was treated like a problem to be contained. Too black, too fierce, too powerful. The combination terrified people used to controlling black women and cashing the checks. In 1965, during the Ike and Tina era, a promoter in Alabama reportedly banned her from performing because the venue was for white entertainers only. Tina stood backstage in full stage makeup, wig fixed, heels on, listening to the crowd scream her name. Security then escorted her out through a back alley like a trespasser at her own show. When she finally escaped Ike in 1976, the bruises on her body faded, but a different kind of violence waited at the label offices. Executives told her she wouldn't sell without Ike's name because white audiences recognize him, not you. Some paperwork still required both of their names just to get basic bookings. In one meeting, an Atlantic Records employee reportedly said, "She's too black, too strong, too dangerous to market alone." Tina sat there, face composed, jaw tight, as if she hadn't heard a thing. But she heard it. She carried it. In the early 1980 seconds, as she clawed her way through a grueling comeback, Vegas lounges turned her down. She was told she didn't have the white glamour they wanted. She was urged to soften her hair, lighten her image in promos, smile more especially for white audiences. Tina refused to shrink. No softened edges, no fake sweetness, just grit and electric fury. When Private Dancer blew open the doors in 1984, it wasn't just a career revival. It was a verdict on every person who said she was too black, too strong, too dangerous to stand alone. Her survival was not an accident. It was defiance. She didn't just outlast them. She proved how wrong they were about what kind of black woman the world would embrace. 10. Chaka Khan, the black woman they tried to break. Chaka Khan's voice sounded like fire set to melody, wild, free, impossible to tame. The industry loved the sound, but not the power behind it. So instead of dimming the speakers, they tried to dim her. In 1978, during a Rufus session in Chicago, a producer told her to tone down the blackness in your voice, because the label wanted cleaner crossover hits. Chaka stared at him through the booth glass, eyes blazing, then did the opposite. She sang harder. Gritty, raw, unfiltered. The next day, that same producer filed a complaint with the label calling her difficult. That word difficult became a weapon. Award shows and live broadcasts told their own story. At the 1984 American Music Awards rehearsals, her microphone mysteriously cut out twice during soundcheck, then worked perfectly for the white artist who followed. According to an insider, certain shows would deliberately turn her down in the mix so she wouldn't overshadow headliners. One night, after yet another malfunction during a live broadcast, Chaka stormed backstage and shouted, "They want me to disappear inside my own damn voice." Labels pushed her relentlessly. Straighten your hair, sing cleaner, don't improvise too much, don't scare the white audience. Photographers airbrushed her skin. Publicists begged her to stay away from political comments. Engineers told her to smooth out her edges. Each instruction was a small cut. She later told Smokey Robinson, "They want me to vanish inside the voice they say they love." That line summed up her entire fight. They craved the sound, but feared the woman producing it. But Chaka never disappeared. She yelled. She fought. She sang louder, higher, freer, and no matter how many knobs they turned, they couldn't mute her for long. 11. Donna Summer, the disco queen they burned alive. Donna Summer didn't just ride the disco wave, she was its heartbeat. And because disco was born out of black, queer, and immigrant spaces, the rage that came for the genre eventually came for her. Everything started to implode on the 12th of July, 1979, at Chicago's Comiskey Park, Disco Demolition Night. Thousands of angry white rock fans packed into the stadium to destroy disco records. They chanted slurs. Confederate flags were seen waving in the stands. Records were piled, blown up, stomped on, set on fire. They weren't just burning vinyl. Symbolically, they were burning her. Donna reportedly watched the footage at home, silent. Later, in interviews, she said it felt like they hated her for being black and successful, blamed her for a sound they wanted erased. The aftermath hit fast. Radio stations across the country launched "Disco Sucks" campaigns and quietly blacklisted her music. Executives who once begged for her next single now dodged her calls. Networks refused to play "Bad Girls" and "Dim All the Lights," claiming disco was over when what they really meant, according to some insiders, was a black woman would no longer be allowed to dominate the charts that way. Between 1980 and 1982, Donna reportedly noticed her promo budgets shrinking, recording sessions delayed, tours cut short with flimsy excuses. A producer told her the labels wanted white women to take over pop now. Meanwhile, white artists freely borrowed disco's sound and were celebrated as innovators. Donna had built the house. Then she was shown the door. She fought back, reinvented herself, changed styles. But in private, she carried the sting. She once told a friend, "They punished me for making people dance." America didn't just declare disco dead. It tried to write Donna out of the history of the very culture she helped create. 12. Prince, the genius who fought a war alone. Prince's war with the music industry wasn't metaphorical. It was a real battle, contracts for weapons, masters as hostages.